Welcome to All About Love, a program for couples, would-be couples, or anyone with an interest in having amazingly successful relationships at home and at work. With your host, Wendy Pegan, relationship expert, mediator, and founder of the Creative Relationship Center, and sponsored by Lancaster Medical. If you would like to participate on today's program, call now, 803-1520. That's 803-1520.
Welcome to All About Love, where every Sunday from 11 to 12 we discuss your relationships, from couples, families, divorce, and everything in between. I'm Wendy Pegan, host of All About Love and founder of Creative Relationship Center, where our philosophy is to empower couples and families to become resilient and strong through counseling, coaching, classes, and mediation. This is where we help couples to remain court-free and stress-free. Today we're going to be talking about too strict parenting stressed out kids and the result from that. And actually, we're going to be talking about a number of different parenting styles. And joining me today will be Christina Shine, who has her own mediation and marital law firm, and Tim Sobolewski, president of Financial Planning Center. Also joining me will be part of my research team, Courtney Kruger, and Caitlin is on vacation today. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Audience, just as a reminder, you can call in today with questions or comments about too strict parenting or parenting issues in general at 803-1520. You can visit our website at creativerelationshipcenter.com or go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/Creative Relationship Center for more information on successful parenting and successful couples. In doing some of the research on this, we had originally talked about too strict parenting and stressed out kids, mostly because at one point in time we were seeing just an amazing amount of very pressured kids. And in fact, there's a number of books and a lot of research that has now come out on children who are really overstressed, overtaxed, on the number of things that they're doing in school, the number of programs they're involved in. I just spoke with one of my children's friends yesterday who is doing as much as 12 hours of dance a week. And that's in addition to violin lessons and acting lessons and et cetera, and they're still in elementary school. So overtaxing our kids. But that brought to a discussion of different parenting styles and parents' expectations. And I thought maybe we could do is talk about some of the differences that we see in different parenting today. And one of the probably most prevalent that for most of our generation and here was the authoritarian parenting. And Christina, you and I shared earlier about, do we see authoritarian parenting much today? That real strict, do as I say, not as I do, kind of children are meant to be seen and not heard, type of rigid type of parenting. I wonder, what kind of parents do you usually see? Because you do a lot of mediation with divorcing parents.
I do. And in the parents that I see that are doing mediation, they tend to be more on the same page in their parenting style. And in general, I would say that the parents I see are much, much more permissive than the parents of my parents' generation that I had any experience with. They're much more child-focused as opposed to the relationship of the parents focused. I think when I was growing up, I saw my friends and myself fitting into my parents' life. Now what I see with my clients is that the parents are trying to fit themselves into their children's lives and making everything child-focused and child-centered.
So do you think these are more permissive parents?
They're definitely more permissive parents. And the parents that I see that are in the most conflict are not really my mediation clients by and large, but litigation clients, where I have one parent who is acting as the BFF, and the other parent then becomes the disciplinarian who turns into the controlling, overprotective, controlling freak in the eyes of the child, and in the description of the parent who is the cool BFF, who has more of a friend relationship with that child as opposed to a parent-child relationship.
I would imagine that has, since the theme of our show was we're stressing out kids and taxing kids, and of course parenting is primarily what has an effect on our kids, how we handle things as parents, how we handle things as just people in society in general. And of course, we've always got our own parents looking over our shoulders, saying things like, "You're letting him do that? I can't believe you're letting him do that." And in fact, I just had a conversation with a client the other day regarding disciplinary action that he took on his own son, who is younger, elementary school age, and he disciplined him because his own father or grandfather, I can't remember which, made a comment about, "Are you going to let him get away with that?" And the dad may not have seen that as an issue, but became stressed, and as we often do, kind of like go back into our own childhood of oh my God, that's right, I wouldn't have been allowed to have done that. So he got up and disciplined his own child, who of course had all kinds of reactions to that.
He might also have had daddy issues himself, like, well, I don't want my dad to think that I'm, a weak parent either. He might still not, he might be disciplining his son and thinking this isn't right or this isn't what I would do, but just be having, daddy issues.
To get approval from his own dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and how much of our own parenting has affected us as parents. I mean, I'll be the first one to say that I probably spent the majority of my life saying, "I'll never do that. I'll never do that. I'll never do that." And of course, the few times that I heard myself doing the same thing, I hit myself in the head going, "Oh my God, I'm doing that."
Yeah, I think we all go through that. I know that I feel like I got a second chance. I get to replay some things that I would have liked to have done differently. And so now I feel like I've got this opportunity to do things a little bit differently. And just like you, sometimes I hit myself in the head and say, "I can't believe I just said that," or "I can't believe I just reacted that way," and then have to pull back and remind myself, I didn't like it so much first time around, so I don't think I'm going to impart that on my kids either.
Oh, I think that's also the best evidence that what we say to our kids is carved in stone in their minds, and is the fact that what our parents said to us is carved in the stone of our minds, and it's awfully hard to overcome it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we have to face that. Or fortunately, I shouldn't say unfortunately, fortunately too, we have to face that when we are raising our own kids, because then we take a look at, well, what did our parents do that maybe wasn't as successful for us? That we may want to see, be a little bit different. My own parents had very, very extreme differences in their parenting. My father was from England. His parents were very rigid. They believed in the rule of being seen and not heard, and certainly also believed in the rule of corporal punishment. And my father would very much say, if we got hit at school, you went home and you got hit too, because of course you were supposed to just obey. Where my mother came from a Sicilian background where screaming was still an option. Screaming at the kids was an option. But there really wasn't any hitting that went on, and there was certainly a lot of warmth, emotional warmth, and you knew that you were loved.
Right. Yeah, I have to say I was actually born in Sicily, so I got the first-hand Sicilian upbringing, and there was really no corporal punishment in my household growing up. There were sometimes some threats, and my dad had the gift of the look. He could just give you the look, and everybody would just stop dead in their tracks, and that was all he had to do. But there was never really any corporal punishment. There was always the threat of, wait till your father comes home. If you don't stop that, I'm going to tell your father. But it never really amounted to much, because by the time he got home, he was tired and he hadn't been there, and it just blew over.
Well, let's talk about some of the strictness in parenting styles that are really way too strict, and the types of behaviors or the stress that children certainly can feel when they come from homes where they're way too strict. As I wonder sometimes when I see, as you know, I see a lot of parents who come in, they're in the process of divorcing, or they're considering divorcing, or they have already divorced.
Right.
And are now coming in to try and work through their parenting differences. And of course, the thing that I say to most parents is opposites do tend to attract. So you probably attracted somebody who had a different parenting style than you. It wasn't very successful during the marriage unless people have come together and created a whole new line of parenting. Now they're divorcing, usually, as you would probably agree, over parenting issues. And now living in separate households where they're going to try and make these parenting differences work somehow, usually by try to convince the kids of whose parenting style is better.
Right, they're competing.
They're
I
absolutely
see an awful lot of competing for, you wouldn't be able to do this maybe at your dad's house, but I'm the nicer parent, without saying that. Making it easier for the kids at your house and at the other parent's house, and therefore making the kids more likely to want to stay with you than go visit the other parent.
Well, then you also have a good dose of divorce guilt on top of that.
You do.
That can motivate parents too.
Right, which I imagine would lead the parent who's probably naturally the more authoritative parent to kind of take a back seat, because he or she is feeling like, if I step up and discipline, I'm going to lose the connection that I have to these kids.
That's right.
Because they're already somehow being bought off by the other parent,
Yeah, which reduces the level of overall discipline, I think, for the child.
which isn't good for the child.
No.
Right.
Well, guilt, let's talk about that, because that's probably number one. I think in very authoritarian families, guilt is usually used as the primary source of which you get kids to behave. So if you can make somebody feel guilty, and of course guilt and shame, I remember hearing things like, see those people over there? Those people are watching you, watching your behavior. And I remember thinking, even as a kid, why would they be watching me?
Right.
Who do you know? I really believed my mother had a spy in every corner of the school, everywhere that we went. And
But there actually were spies. I remember when I was a kid, you'd see nothing but, I came from a Polish family, and there were lots of little old Polish ladies sitting on their porches watching everything, watching us all the time, watching all the other kids, watching each other. They were spies.
and before you got home, they had called your
They'd
parents.
reported everything. That's right.
Well, to some degree, that may have been, and I kind of look on that a little bit lovingly and saying at least we knew we were protected by those people,
Right,
which is
right.
not what we have today.
No,
But
now
I mean,
no one's on the front porch, by the way. They're all sitting in the back or in the
Yeah.
TV room, and there's no community involvement. If it does take a village, the village is watching TV. They're not
Yeah.
watching the kids.
yeah, that's a good point. Unfortunately, when you did have all those people watching, though, you had all those people giving their say-so of what makes what you should do with your children.
And by the way, I don't think that's entirely a bad thing, because I remember when I had my son that he didn't come with an instruction manual, so getting some help.
Well, so long as those people had good advice to give.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Still up in the air.
Yeah.
Right.
And getting help for parenting, whether it's getting help for parenting or getting help for even being a couple, because I think it all kind of blends in together, is that you don't have an instruction manual. You don't have an instruction manual for getting married and having a good, healthy relationship. You look at your parents, you look at your grandparents. You don't have an instruction manual for being a good parent. So that's what we do at Creative Relationship Center. That's why we have classes and couples college and helping people who can navigate around what am I doing? What can I do different? And I will usually hear parents ask those questions after they've had a divorce.
Right. Well, Wendy, what do you see in children of divorce or just maybe children that are brought in by their parents? Do you see kids who are affected by their parents making them feel guilty? Like a parent who may say to them, do you know how many sacrifices I've made for you?
Oh.
And this is how you repay my sacrifice. Do you see that kind of thing coming in?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I see that probably more as adults, clients who come in as an adult, who have lived through that guilt-invoking child rearing. And whether or not the parents have stayed together or the parents have separated and one parent just stayed silent during their together stages, but kids who grow up with guilt generally tend to, it profoundly affects them. It affects them. Actually, they become much more permissive parents. The kind of parents that, like you were talking about, the ones who want to be the best friend, the ones who are afraid to assert rules, the ones who are afraid that their kids are going to rebel against them, and may allow, they will tend to not put those boundaries, set those good, healthy boundaries on their kids because they're so fearful of making their own kids feel guilty. because it still profoundly affects them. That's probably the most difficult of all things to remove and release from people. And if you think about it, when I've had clients who felt controlled by guilt, oftentimes those boundaries play into kids or adults who may have been sexually abused at another point in time. Because think about it, I mean, isn't guilt the number one factor that gets used, that sense of controlling those people? So they're not healthy, strong boundaries that have been placed in these family systems. You may not have misbehaved, but let's face it, kids have to misbehave a little bit in order to learn those boundaries and those rules, and to grow up successful in life. We're going to take a break. We will be back in just a minute talking about too strict parents and pressured kids.
Do you fight about the same things over and over? Have you thought about calling it quits? Do you need help handling a new relationship, a marriage, or just need some support getting through the stress of life without losing your marriage or your mind? Hi, it's Wendy Pegan, founder of Creative Relationship Center. Sometimes life gets out of hand, and having some support and guidance makes sense. At Creative Relationship Center, we believe that the couple is the core of every family. When we help you strengthen yourself as a couple, your children naturally make healthier choices. We offer counseling, relationship coaching, couples retreats, even classes at our new couples college. And if we can't help you stay together, we'll mediate your divorce in the privacy of our offices without expensive attorneys or court. For more information on our services, visit us at creativerelationshipcenter.com. That's creativerelationshipcenter.com. We'll keep you strong for generations to come.
When it comes to matrimonial and family law, you want solutions, not conflict. That's why so many Western New Yorkers turn to Christina Lana Shine, because litigation can be financially and emotionally exhausting. Options such as mediation or a collaborative process can often be the best way to work through your legal dispute. As an attorney trained in mediation, Christina Lana Shine can not only provide the mediation services, but can also convert your agreement into a legally binding contract. Let Christina Lana Shine put her 25 years of experience to work for you. Call 631-4841 for Christina Lana Shine Esquire on Main Street, Williamsville.
Do you need help planning your retirement? Is your household budget something you just don't want to look at? Then maybe it's time to make an appointment with the Financial Planning Center to develop a personalized professional financial plan. The Financial Planning Center can help with financial goals and budgets of any size. If you're a middle-class investor, you will be especially happy because there are no account minimums and they take no commissions on investments. And if that's not enough, your first visit to the Financial Planning Center is absolutely free. Call 240-4304 today. That's 240-4304 for the Financial Planning Center.
You're listening to All About Love with Wendy Pegan. Call now, 803-1520. That's 803-1520.
Okay, welcome back. This is Wendy Pegan with All About Love. And we're talking today with Christina, Tim, and Courtney about too strict parents and stressed out kids. And on the break, we were talking a little bit about the differences in guilt. Let's kind of bring that up again. Is guilt healthy or not healthy in raising kids?
Well, I speaking as someone who grew up Catholic, I think there's something to be said for institutionalized guilt. And the fact that there were social controls that were effectively perpetrated by the church through the use of guilt and shame. I mean, there's no such thing as shameful behavior anymore. I look at Anthony Weiner.
Well, okay, but I also grew up very Catholic on the other side of the room here. And I think there's a big difference. I agree with you that there's an attitude that seems to be prevalent in society that there are no more rules. Everything, whatever is good for you may be subjectively good for you, and nobody has the right to judge. And I think that's wrong. I think there should be an objective rule of right and wrong and good behavior and bad behavior. But I don't know that you want to actually institute guilt to get people to behave appropriately. I think there's a difference between that and saying this is moral good behavior and here are the consequences to not behaving in this way and this is why you don't do it. That's different than saying to somebody, you're awful, you're terrible, you're worthless because
You
you
don't
did
have
that.
to say those words. You don't have to be mean to use guilt effectively.
Well, no, you don't have to say those words, but if that's the feeling that comes across is that you're less than good because of that mistake that you made, there's got to be a healthy balance here. You want people to take responsibility for their bad actions, feel bad about their bad actions, and change their behavior.
Consequences.
But the thing
right.
is that, you say that people don't have the right to judge. In fact, some people do have the right to judge. They're called judges. And what happens to kids, I think, sometimes that have not had a lifetime of social pressure, of subjection to, I think guilt and shame and social pressure can be useful tools to promulgate social rules. And without those rules, people do end up in front of judges.
Well,
and
I think
it turns out they do have the right to put you away for a long
They
time.
do. I'm not saying that we shouldn't judge. I'm saying that judging is part of being part of a society. If you don't
Right.
want to be judged, go live in a cave.
Exactly.
correct.
Yeah.
Correct. But there is a difference between somebody feeling morally taking what's the word I'm looking for? Taking responsibility for their actions and feeling remorseful. I think that's what you're talking about. It almost sounds like if we don't impose that sense of guilt on somebody, they won't feel remorseful. And I think there's a difference, just from a clinical perspective, there is a difference between feeling remorseful that you've done something, geez, I'm sorry, I whacked into your car. Geez, I'm sorry that I did that. I wasn't paying attention. It's taking responsibility and ownership versus feeling as if somebody's always looking over your shoulder. And I see people all the time who just apologize for almost everything, almost to the point of, I'm sorry, I was in your way.
Are they Canadian?
But still, there's also a difference between that and a child that blatantly disobeyed a rule and must, I think, feel bad about it. Otherwise,
Yes.
they haven't learned a lesson, and that is where guilt is crucial.
Well,
If they have
understanding
no guilt, then they're going to do it again.
Understanding the consequences of their behavior is certainly important, but making them feel as if they are, as Christina said, bad or stupid, or poor excuse for being there. I think there's also we might have a difference here in the definition of guilt
I
in
think
general.
that's exactly what
Yeah,
we're
I
at.
think so, because I think it's possible to make a child feel bad
guilty.
about what he's done, and I think that's useful, in fact, as opposed to making them feel like worthless human beings. I don't
Right,
think
right.
that
And
a
it's
parent does that.
Correct, and it's the difference between setting clear boundaries.
Well,
for somebody.
you like using the word boundaries. I like using shame, guilt, and social pressure. But I'm not sure we're talking about anything that's very different. You're defining it in different terms, but I'm not sure that it's very different. I think we all agree that to make a child feel worthless is not a good thing.
Well,
But to make them feel bad about something, guilty about something, I'm not sure that's such a bad thing. Callers, where are you?
Well, callers, please call in at 803-1520 if you would like to discuss just parenting issues in general, the difference between shame and guilt and boundary setting. But let's talk about some of the, because we could go on and on about this, but let's talk about some of the issues that we see with kids that come from too strict parenting. And then in a little while, we'll also talk about over-permissive parents. Kids who have too strict parenting often have communication problems, and one of the reasons they have communication problems is because they haven't been allowed to voice their own opinion. And again, coming from those family systems where there's a lot of guilt and shame or overbearing parents is it's my way or the highway. And we were kind of laughing about, your dad saying to you, this is not a democracy.
That's right. But luckily for us, as he would say, when we would ever complain about something being unfair, he would just look at us and start to chuckle and say, well, do you think this is a democracy? This isn't a democracy. This is a dictatorship. And luckily for you, I'm a benevolent dictator.
Yep, I used to hear the same
And
thing.
I have to admit, I completely agree with that one. But see, even there is that level of boundaries that being set.
Yes.
Is that, you know what, I'm interested in your opinion. However, I'm making the decision.
Exactly. Being
So-
a parent.
Correct. And I would agree that in a lot of the cases that we oftentimes don't see parents who are willing to set those limits and boundaries because they're fearful that they're really going
The kids won't like them.
Well, the kids won't like them,
Or
and
the kids just won't listen to them anyway, and then they'll look like bad parents.
Yeah. Yeah, I do see a lot of parents that ask their children way too many questions and want way too many opinions before making a decision. There's always that, well, what do you think? What do you want? What do you want to do? Which gets me back to that child-focused style of parenting versus I'm the parent, you're the child, here are the decisions that we're making, we're going to let you know what the decisions are. We're interested in your opinion, but you're not making the decision.
But then the extensive explanations and rationalizing that a parent will do when you're out someplace and you see that little Jimmy put an ice cream cone on his brother's head, and the parent will take 5 minutes explaining why that was a bad thing, little Jimmy, and you can't do that to your brother, and blah, blah, blah.
But I do see adults who, when they'll talk to me about it, have come from very strict, almost oppressive households. And those are people who have a very hard time making a decision, speaking up for themselves, giving their opinions, and end up, unfortunately, in bad relationships, unable to parent their own kids.
Not to put too much pressure on parents here, but...
Well, we're all parents, and except for Courtney.
That's all right.
And, it's not easy to be a parent. There's always that balance you're trying to find of being authoritative enough, but not being oppressive.
well, let's talk about what some of those authoritative enough, or maybe signs that you are really way too strict with your kids. Oftentimes in very authoritative families, authoritarian families, I should say, is that there's too many rules. So many rules that all you're going to do now is police all these rules.
Right.
You have to be behind your kids all the time.
Right. And they become arbitrary. I mean, I see kids who will talk to me about what their parents' rules are, and they come across as just being controlling for the pure point of being able to control them.
Right.
And so when the rules are arbitrary and they don't make sense to the kids don't really want to follow the rules. They'll give their parents lip service, but they're very resentful that they recognize that these rules don't make any sense and they don't really serve any purpose.
It sounds like there could be a difference of degree in terms of the number of rules that are forced onto children and how that goes from being orderly to oppressive.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's the difference that Wendy is making between authoritarian and authoritative.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, you're right that kids will start to do the blind obedience, and they'll start behaving in a fashion that their parents may be requesting of them but don't understand the reasons for it. So, and how many times do I talk to parents about asking them questions, why are you doing that? And they have absolutely no idea, and it gets into that whole parent in the roast in the pan.
Cut off the end of the roast story.
Cut off the end of the roast, yeah. Why are you cutting off the end of the roast? Well, I didn't have a pan big enough. But for 4 generations, we were cutting off the end of the roast, and throwing it away because great-grandma didn't have a pan big enough. So we often tend to do some of those same rules that maybe our parents or grandparents put into place, but there's no place for it today. Years ago, we were talking earlier about where children were expected to contribute to the family. Children were expected to contribute in chores and things like that. Well, parents feel so pressured today because of the jobs that they're doing and running the kids around, and they don't feel that kids should be participating with some of those chores. And we get into the whole entitlement and et cetera, et cetera.
I think parents don't leave them time for any chores between.
Well, that's true too.
Karate lessons, school sports, music lessons. They're shuttling the kids' own personal shuttle service. There's no time for chores. There's no time to eat dinner.
No, and it's stressful for everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, I can tell you we have 2 kids that are in a competitive sport, and they're swimmers, and they swim for their schools, and they swim for a club team. And there is a time of year, which is about to start, where it's extremely stressful for everyone.
Yep.
Because they're doing double practices, we're doing double meets. I have to actually arrange in advance, when are we going to be able to sit down together? When are we going to have dinners together? What can I make that I can make in 20 minutes that they can eat before they have to go to practice? And the crazy thing is, though, when you try to get kids de-stressed by not being so focused, if they want to play a sport, by maybe doing it a little bit more casually, as we did when we were growing up, there doesn't seem to be any place for it. because all of the coaches are insisting by age 12 they have to make a decision on a certain sport or they're not going to be any good at it.
Oh, even
You
in
have to take
dance,
yourself
they go into
seriously. You
Yeah.
have to. I mean, that's really what it is. If this is what your life is going to be, you have to start training young. I mean, I have to say that I have some understanding from sports. I've played softball since I was 3 years old, and if you want to be good, you have to have some level of devotion or dedication, and sometimes it just doesn't leave a lot of time for.
But it takes away the fun. We used to be able to do multiple sports. Well, we would play the sport of the season and not have to worry about, being in training for the pro sport.
But would you win?
But what's fun?
Winning.
It is
Well,
fun.
that's when you used to be able to win. That's a whole nother subject. But
Don't
you're
forget, losing is bad for your self-esteem. Don't forget.
But learning to lose
Most
is
of the
good
sports
too,
don't allow
because you're not
winning
going to
today.
win at everything.
Yeah, but when you lose, you run laps.
Maybe that's the lesson you learn that prevents you from losing in some other part of your life.
What about parents' expectations being too high today? I see a generation of people who have really made something with their lives. And years ago, generations ago, when we had people flocking to this country, not that they still don't, but they, their comment was we wanted people, of course, to speak English. We didn't want them to speak the mother tongue, whatever that was. And parents' expectations were high, mostly because they wanted their children to be able to do better than they did. But sometimes I look at people and I see, physicians and professional people who have been very successful and they've done very well for themselves, and they're still saying, "I want my kids to do better than me." And I get to the point where I say, well, what's better? Do people actually ask themselves anymore, what is better than me? Have you ever reached, as a parent, have you ever reached that level where you feel good enough? And if you don't feel good enough as a parent, how are you going to just place that on your children and help them understand that being able to feel good enough is okay? So when parents have this expectation, you need to do better, you need to strive harder, you need to get all A's. I see on the other end of the spectrum, I see all kinds of kids, college students, which is a high number of people in my practice, who are coming in on anti-anxieties and antidepressants. They have migraines, they're developing ulcers already, they're just taxed, they feel they need to reach that, A+ or that 4.0 because their parents are going to be disappointed in them.
But a lot of that is also self-imposed. My parents never had those expectations of me, but I still wanted to get all A's. I wanted to play every sport. I wanted to be in every play. I wanted to do everything. I mean, A- is a failure.
Mm-hmm. You sound like my older daughter.
But did you impose that level of strictness, or is that self-imposed?
It is mostly self-imposed.
So it doesn't necessarily come from the parents. It comes from society itself. Like just being in the college system, you're always looking at the person next to you saying, I'm going to beat that person.
A lot of competition.
Exactly.
There's a lot of competition out there.
Something that occurs to me, though, I mean, this morning I was listening to one of the talk shows where they were talking about the disparity in incomes and disparity in achievement levels at different groups of society. And everyone here, so far really we're talking about middle class, upper middle class, achievement levels, parenting styles, and I think it's two worlds out there right now. There's not the same, the sort of the luxury of which sports do the kids play, versus are they getting an A- or an A, contrasted with a 21% graduation rate in Buffalo City schools. And I think that there's some other parenting issues there that we're not talking about, but and there's no lack of authoritarian parenting in some of those communities, I think. Go to Walmart, you'll hear mothers screaming at their kids and whacking them in the head.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. We will be right back on Too Strict Parenting, Stressed Out Kids in just a minute.
When it comes to matrimonial and family law, you want solutions, not conflict. That's why so many Western New Yorkers turn to Christina Lana Shine, because litigation can be financially and emotionally exhausting. Options such as mediation or a collaborative process can often be the best way to work through your legal dispute. As an attorney trained in mediation, Christina Lana Shine can not only provide the mediation services, but can also convert your agreement into a legally binding contract. Let Christina Lana Shine put her 25 years of experience to work for you. Call 631-4841 for Christina Lana Shine Esquire on Main Street, Williamsville.
Hi, this is Wendy Pegan, host of All About Love here on KB Radio and founder of Creative Relationship Center. If you've been thinking to yourself, he's changed, or she's not as loving as she used to be to me, or we don't have anything in common anymore, then consider making an appointment at Creative Relationship Center. At Creative Relationship Center, we have an association of professionals in the fields of counseling, legal, and financial planning. We offer couples counseling, coaching, mediation, workshops, and classes for adults at all levels of commitment, from pre-marriage through post-marriage. Creative Relationship Center can help your family stay together. Or if you've already decided to separate, we can help mediate your differences civilly without the major expense of attorneys or stress of going to court. Consider having the relationship you've always wanted. Consider Creative Relationship Center. To learn more about our couples college, couples retreats, divorce mediation, and many other services available, go to creativerelationshipcenter.com. That's creativerelationshipcenter.com.
Do you need help planning your retirement? Is your household budget something you just don't want to look at? Then maybe it's time to make an appointment with the Financial Planning Center to develop a personalized professional financial plan. The Financial Planning Center can help with financial goals and budgets of any size. If you're a middle-class investor, you will be especially happy because there are no account minimums and they take no commissions on investments. And if that's not enough, your first visit to the Financial Planning Center is absolutely free. Call 240-4304 today. That's 240-4304 for the Financial Planning Center.
You're listening to All About Love with Wendy Pegan. Call now, 803-1520. That's 803-1520.
Welcome back, audience. Once again, just a reminder, you can call in at 803-1520 with any questions, comments. Today we're talking about two stressed parents and two stressed children. And we were talking before the break of how different it is today, or is it that different? I don't know if parenting styles have actually changed. I think the world is always changing, but I don't think parenting styles have changed that much. I think there's always going to be very permissive parents. I need some water. Very permissive parents who are loving, but, they just don't really set any boundaries or a path, if you will, for their kids, allowing almost anything to happen. Those are the laissez-faire parents. There's parents who are authoritative, who have just kind of taken over for their children and required them to just obey. And we're still seeing those parents today. And then there's also authoritative parents who are people who are nurturing and loving and kind, but also do set good boundaries for their children. And let's just talk about some of the things that maybe I see in my practice with kids or adults who've come in when they've been raised in very authoritarian backgrounds where children have not been allowed to make decisions. They have not been allowed to feel good about themselves in general. And sometimes we look at them and we laugh at ourselves when we grew up in some of those family systems. We were talking about Everybody Loves Raymond, who had a very Italian mother. I know you didn't see the show, but a very Italian mother who lived across the street, who was always throwing herself in the middle of her son and his wife and how they were raising their kids, and basically telling Deborah that she wasn't a good enough mother by some very well-hidden, sarcastic comments.
Sometimes they just told her, though.
Sometimes she told her right out. That's right. But kids who grow up in a lot of these homes tend to be aggressive at some point in time. They may be very shy in the beginning because they're really not quite sure what their social skills should be, but by the time they reach middle school and certainly high school, they can be either continue to be shy, they can become aggressive. They can actually become bullies themselves. Their school performances can go to either extreme. They can be the kids who absolutely have to meet those parents' needs and desires for having straight-A students so that they can become competitive. Parents are often competitive with their kids. Sometimes because they themselves didn't have the opportunities to do that, we tend to think of them as those, what do you call them, those show moms?
The stage moms,
The
the
stage
dance
moms,
moms,
yes, yes. You see them in that tiaras and...
Toddlers and tiaras.
What is it called?
Toddlers and tiaras.
Toddlers and tiaras. Yeah, there's the great...
Is that a great parenting example?
Yeah. There with Honey Boo Boo.
Honey Boo Boo. I knew
Honey
that was
Boo
going
Boo.
to come
Oh
up.
my God.
She
that's
wrote a
another
book
one.
recently and had a signing at Barnes & Noble, so I don't know if we should be criticizing. She's
surprised she
making
can
millions.
read, actually.
Yeah, well, somebody probably voted for her.
Well, there again is the question: making millions.
Making
does
money.
Is that happiness?
She's happy with her family.
There you go.
Well, there are those parents that try to live through their kids.
That's
Yeah,
exactly what
absolutely.
that
They
is.
push them really hard in a direction that they would have wanted to go in had they been given the opportunity, whether it's lack of education, lack of money, lack of opportunity, and never really take the time to ask themselves, is this what their kids want? And so those might be those college students that you're seeing, that they push, and they're pushing them for what they would have wanted to do, but never either had the ability or the strength to do themselves or the opportunity to do themselves, and then these kids are pushed into things that they didn't want to do.
Well, and I think when you've got parents who are either way too strict, needing kids to fit into certain ideas of what it is that the parents themselves want, or you're being very overprotective and maybe very laissez-faire and allowing kids so much latitude that they can't make decisions at all. Both of those parenting styles are going to lead kids to becoming adults or young adults where they really can't make any decisions at all, because every decision they make, they're very fearful is going to be the wrong decision. And that often leads to failure to launch kids that we're seeing a lot of today.
So we have that whole generation of kids that won't move out of their parents' homes because they can never make that final leap into adulthood.
Well, they're fearful of making mistakes, because without that very aggressive parent who's going to be telling me what to do, which maybe internally I can't agree with, or that highly permissive parent who says, you're just going to find your way, I found my way and you're going to find your way too, is that the kids are really afraid of taking risks. They haven't learned from any mistakes because they haven't made any.
Right.
Somebody's always been there to it's kind of like when your kid's learning how to walk. If you've got a parent on either side of them and they never skin their knee, they never know what that pain of failure is like. And so therefore they can't make those decisions.
They've had helicopter parents.
Oh, absolutely.
Helicopter parents?
You've never heard of a helicopter parent?
No, and I hadn't heard of that roast reference you made earlier either.
that
I
was
don't
Wendy.
I didn't understand.
Oh, is it?
I hadn't heard of that either.
I
but
don't understand
you
the
know
re-
what
cutting
a
off.
hover parent is, or a helicopter parent? They're always there.
Oh, is
Always
that what you
hovering.
call
Always hovering over the child, so that if the
okay.
child starts to fall, they're there to pick them up before they hit the ground.
Oh, see, that's the opposite. My grandma, I put my hand through her garage window and she slapped a Band-Aid on it, and I'm like hemorrhaging blood, and she's like,
Walk it off.
yeah, walk it off. Yeah,
Walk it off.
Be tough. Yeah, that's like the absolute opposite.
That might be the laissez-faire we were talking about.
I don't know if she was laissez-faire because she had rules. She was Italian, so she had rigidity, but she also wanted us to be tough. She didn't want to raise any wimps. I mean, I'm not saying she. Okay, maybe I'm going a little too
But
far.
when you need to go to the emergency room, I think
Yeah.
it's time to set the boundary.
Right, I guess so. That's probably true.
Well, isn't that always the question that people have, whether it's when they should leave a relationship, when they should push their children to go to school, when is my child faking, and why is my child faking to stay home with me? Being able to set those, going to go back to the boundaries, being able to set those appropriate boundaries. An appropriate boundary at the kitchen table, having had 6 of my own children, having to remove them periodically from the kitchen table because there were certain things that they were doing that just wasn't appropriate at the table. And how that was handled, at least they knew the boundary of when we come to the kitchen table, we're allowed to talk about anything. But you're not allowed to stab your brother with a fork. You're not allowed to throw the milk in somebody's face. There are certain things that you're allowed to do and not allowed to do. And consequently, since I set the rule of being able to talk about anything, everybody who has ever sat at my kitchen table
Vouch, they talk about anything.
This is very true.
knows that we do talk about anything, but talk is okay. And I do usually say to parents who are coming in, particularly after a divorce, and they have had just an awful divorce. Maybe it was litigated, where we've got two different parenting styles, and they are really trying to overcompensate with their kids, as you know, for those different parenting styles. And they get into another relationship, and they're very fearful of those parenting styles that the new wife or husband has, that I often see in court.
Right.
You've got this poor guy who's caught between his ex-wife who wants this and his new wife who's making all kinds of demands, and they're back in court for parenting, and which often is not, it's just not a court issue. It's a parenting issue.
That's another thing, too, when you have step parents that come in and they want to make rules that the original parents might not have, or that's like a whole another level of...
Well, it's learning those parenting styles, and if the audience takes nothing else away with them today, what I hope they can take away with is, again, the different parenting styles that we have all been raised with, because all of us have had parents or mentors of some sort. And so our parents have either been loving and kind with boundaries, but, was willing to have a dictatorship with benevolence.
Sure.
Or parents who really didn't even know where we were. They were there. Maybe they provided food, clothing, shelter, but they didn't pay attention to us or celebrating our achievements without being too pushy. And then parents who were just, really pushing their kids along and having your kids have to meet your own personal needs, whether that was in behaviors or that was in just lot in life. Success. What is success? Sometimes they have to ask parents, what is success to you? Because that might not be the same thing for your child. Does that mean you should let them live with them forever? No. There's a difference.
I would hope not. No, I think we all get two shots at parenting. I really do. I think you don't get a choice on who your parents are, and you don't get a choice on how your parents parent you.
Correct.
But you can learn from them, and you can observe, and you can, after some time, look back and reflect and observe and learn. And those things that you liked, that you thought were good, you can continue. And the things that you don't like, you change. So that what you didn't like with your parents' style, you can change in your own parenting style.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, you caught me off base. I was talking to somebody.
Oh, that's okay.
Talking to my producers in there. What about, I have to agree with you, because I often say to people, you can't pick your family, but you can pick your friends. And I am a firm believer in, if you thought how you were raised was great and you're okay with that, but then you meet and marry and have children with somebody else who has a very different parenting style, rather than be fighting over the differences, who's right, who's wrong, take some classes together, or look towards mentors who have kids that are the vision of what you would like to raise, rather than fight over whose style is right or wrong, because that's a never-ending battle. To me, that's the revolving door I talk about in court over and over.
And at that point, you just end up defending your childhood, whether you like it or not.
Right.
You end up defending your family of origin against your spouse's family of origin, and you're never going to back down to say that there was a problem, or maybe there's something you didn't like about it, and you might not even like it, but you're being assaulted. Yeah. So you're not going to back down.
To which your spouse might say, well, look at the way you turned out.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
It's good enough for you. You married me, right?
Right.
Yeah, so, yeah.
And that's just going to continue. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back.
Do you need help planning your retirement? Is your household budget something you just don't want to look at? Then maybe it's time to make an appointment with the Financial Planning Center to develop a personalized professional financial plan. The Financial Planning Center can help with financial goals and budgets of any size. If you're a middle-class investor, you will be especially happy because there are no account minimums and they take no commissions on investments. And if that's not enough, your first visit to the Financial Planning Center is absolutely free. Call 240-4304 today. That's 240-4304. 803-520-5804 for the Financial Planning Center.
When it comes to matrimonial and family law, you want solutions, not conflict. That's why so many Western New Yorkers turn to Christina Lana Shine, because litigation can be financially and emotionally exhausting. Options such as mediation or a collaborative process can often be the best way to work through your legal dispute. As an attorney trained in mediation, Christina Lana Shine can not only provide the mediation services, but can also convert your agreement into a legally binding contract. Let Christina Lana Shine put her 25 years of experience to work for you. Call 631-4841 for Christina Lana Shine Esquire on Main Street, Williamsville.
Do you fight about the same things over and over? Have you thought about calling it quits? Do you need help handling a new relationship, a marriage, or just need some support getting through the stress of life without losing your marriage or your mind? Hi, it's Wendy Pegan, founder of Creative Relationship Center. Sometimes life gets out of hand, and having some support and guidance makes sense. At Creative Relationship Center, we believe that the couple is the core of every family. When we help you strengthen yourself as a couple, your children naturally make healthier choices. We offer counseling, relationship coaching, couples retreats, even classes at our new couples college. And if we can't help you stay together, we'll mediate your divorce in the privacy of our offices without expensive attorneys or court. For more information on our services, visit us at creativerelationshipcenter.com. That's creativerelationshipcenter.com. We'll keep you strong for generations to come.
You're listening to All About Love with Wendy Pegan. Call now, 803-1520. That's 803-1520.
Hi, this is Wendy. Welcome back, callers. You still have a couple minutes to call in at 803-1520. We're talking about pressured parents and stressed out kids, and one of the interesting research articles that we came up with is the differences in how other cultures raise their kids. And Courtney, I know you had done some work and some research on how Asian families work with their kids.
Right. And I'm just looking at an article, and it's about I think it's a Yale professor, and she had wrote a book, and it's called Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother, and she is Chinese, and she talks about, excuse me, that Chinese parents tend to spend more time pushing their kids to study, practice, and achieve, and they also raise more accomplished, academically successful children. And she says it's because they're more demanding and strict than Western mothers. And she goes on to, I'm trying to find like the exact thing.
I like what you tossed out there, Courtney, in your notes about how, according to that study, I think 70% of Western mothers believe that putting too much emphasis on academic success wasn't good for their children, and that none of the Chinese parents felt that way. So they believe that if children weren't successful in school, parents weren't doing their job.
Absolutely.
Yeah, she says she never, she herself, it's an autobiography, she never allowed her kids to have a play date, watch TV, participate in a school play, or choose their own extracurricular activities. The kids are also not allowed to get any grade less than an A or not be the number one student in every subject except gym or drama.
Okay.
And
it's pretty extreme.
Yep, and it works for them. But you also have to remember that in that culture and in that society, that continues to work. I don't necessarily know if that's working here in this country. And there's a lot of research out there that shows what works in other countries don't necessarily work here. I know we talked about that before. But I just want to bring your attention to a wonderful book out there called Pressured Parents, Stressed Out Kids. It's Pressured Parents, Stressed Out Kids by Wendy Grolnick and Kathy Seal. And there's some wonderful tips in there with dealing with competition while raising a successful child. And just to, as a reminder for parents who aren't sure whether they're too strict or they're too remissive or they're going through a divorce and they're not quite sure how to handle their kids, there's always classes, co-parenting classes and coaching that we offer at Creative Relationship Center so that we can help guide you through the process of that. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today on Too Strict Parents and Stressed Out Kids. We hope the listeners came away with at least some knowledge, and we'll certainly be talking about this subject in the future. But thanks again to our sponsors at Lancaster Medical, my guests Christina, Tim, Courtney, and Caitlin. I'm sure you were listening in. My producer, Jimmy, helping us get through a flawless and fun show again. Listeners, thank you again always for listening. Next week, we'll be talking about how jealousy and social media make a toxic combination. Have a great day, everyone.
You've been listening to All About Love with Wendy Pegan, relationship expert, mediator, and founder of the Creative Relationship Center, and sponsored by Lancaster Medical. Be sure to tune in next Sunday morning at 11 for more of